Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs, what he calls Liberation Day, will be happening on April 2nd. And he's saying, this is for real. It's not going to be this thing to where it's slowly rolled out. On April 2nd, there will be major tariffs on the countries that are tariffing the United States, the EU. We know the EU is going to do their own reciprocal tariffs back onto the United States, even though the US is doing reciprocal tariffs. I guess we don't get to do the reciprocals, only they do. It's like they do tariffs on us, then we say, we're going to do tariffs back to you to try and remove your tariffs, and then they say, we're just going to do more reciprocal tariffs against you. It makes no sense. But either way, if all of these tariffs do go into place, you can see the projected revenue year one for the US government. They say just based off the reciprocal, and we don't know if this is actually going to be the revenue because we cannot predict the companies that will stop buying from overseas, which really what these tariffs are for, they're to protect the United States and to promote domestic production. But the first year, there's going to be a lot of revenue because these companies do not have the infrastructure set up to be able to produce the goods. They're still going to have to be buying overseas, and they're going to have to pay that tariff. And then it says, oh, the prices are going to rise. Well, yeah, the prices are going to rise short term, but once we develop more manufacturing in the United States, there's going to be competition with capitalism. The prices are going to come back down, and we're going to have more domestic production, and we're going to bring manufacturing back into the United States. And that's why we've got so many of these countries investing into the U.S. with Trump deregulating things. And now it's been reported around $3.5 trillion in foreign money has been invested into the United States. And these tariffs, they're saying it's $600 billion year one based off the reciprocals. Off the auto tariffs alone, it's $100 billion. And I've seen projections that say the auto tariffs are really not going to raise the price in vehicles too much. It's certain vehicles that it will, like luxury vehicles, but that is something we're going to have to deal with. But either way, you're talking about a huge boom in terms of revenue for the government. And this is really what Trump wanted when it came to tariffs. Now, again, we don't know what Trump is really going to do with the tariffs. It's very unpredictable right now. And I said at a certain point, probably within quarter two, maybe quarter three of 2025, Trump is going to lay out his full plan and say, he's already said with the auto tariffs, we're keeping them on. I'm done with it. I'm tired of talking about it. They're going to be on my full term. So in essence, the 25% auto tariffs will be on through at least Trump's 4-year term. And we'll see what happens with all these other reciprocal tariffs, whether it's a situation to where if we put tariffs on them, then there's some type of deal that's worked out to where all the tariffs get removed, because Trump is only putting the reciprocals on the countries that have them on us. And so we would imagine there's going to be some type of trade renegotiation with Canada. Once that gets worked out, if it does get worked out, then you're going to see the stock market rebound significantly. But this could be something to where Trump might just commit to it anyways, because long-term solution for a short-term problem in terms of the tariffs and bringing back domestic production to the United States rather than outsourcing things. I will say I think Canada's a little bit different just based off its location. We can trade with them easier. Having a reliance on Canada isn't the same as having a reliance on China, which obviously, same thing with EU, just in terms of their geographical location. But either way, this is a huge boom. When you look at our total deficit of $2 trillion, $600 billion, we don't know if it's going to be this fully because we don't know if Trump's going to, this would be Trump completely committing to the reciprocal tariffs. And you would see this boom of $600 billion in revenue for the U.S. government. And this is how Trump can do like the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. You can start talking about certain states with the state income tax. You can start talking about federal taxes coming down significantly for people that make, if your first 150K not taxed, things like that, the Doge dividend. All of that gets worked out when you leverage tariffs the way Trump is doing. And of course, it is going to cause some early economic problems. We know that. We know the media, they've gotten their script. Now they're talking about stagflation, which is just hilarious because they saw the updated, remember the Atlanta Fed, they said, oh, it's going to be minus 2.5%, negative 2.5% GDP growth for the first quarter. And so the media was like, oh, it's going to be a recession. It's a recession. Well, now they updated and they say, oh, we have to admit it's actually plus 0.3 for the first quarter after saying it was minus or negative 2.5. So they've updated it. And so now the media is like, well, we really can't go with recession. Now we have to say it's stagflation. And so they're asking Trump about stagflation. They're saying, well, this is really bad. Look at what's going to happen with projections. We'll know we know with stagflation, it's inflation going up and then the economy going through stagnation. Basically, the economy not doing much in terms of uh, the economy and economic activity, along with inflation going up. Normally, if inflation goes up, the economy is going to be doing very well. Of course, it's a balancing act, just like all economic measures are. You do something positive, something negative is going to happen just as a trade-off. But let's see what Trump says about this. Let me just talk about this. You've got China blocking the $23 billion sale of the Panama Canal ports to BlackRock. And so the story with this is, China had, and I don't want to go through this again. People watch my videos. If you, I'm sorry, I'm going to go through this, but I know I've said this a lot. But think about it. Panama had a diplomatic deal with China that they signed in 2017. They were totally in bed with China. China had bought up, with their Belt and Road Initiative, several ports surrounding the Panama Canal to where they could track U.S. supply going from the Atlantic to Pacific and vice versa. Trump comes in. They send Rubio down to Panama. Remember, Trump said during his inauguration that we are going to take the Panama Canal back. We're sick of it. We're done with the Chinese control. This is absurd. This is Latin America. Why does China have significant power? And it's all soft power is what they say, so they don't anger people, but it is power within the canal. And so Rubio goes down there and he freaks out Panama. Panama says, all right, we're done with them. We're going to rip up the diplomatic relationship we had with China. And then Hong Kong, which owns the ports, they were going to sell the ports to BlackRock, which honestly is probably worse than China owning them. But the point is, Trump just wanted to get the ports out of Chinese hands. And so it was going to happen. But then Beijing said, no, Hong Kong, you can't do that. We don't want you to do that. You didn't come to us and ask us first. So we're not allowing you to sell the ports to BlackRock. So China still wants control surrounding the canal and it's not a good situation. We'll see what happens. Trump said, well, maybe there'll be some type of, you would install a blockade around the canal if you had to, but we don't really want to do that. I mean, Trump's dealing with the thing with Greenland and all this. It's like, do we really want to add this to it? The Panama Canal is very important. When you talk about the ships, it's like 90% of the ships are U.S. or Chinese, 70% are U.S., and then 20% are Chinese, and then the 10% are the rest. So the canal is, we built the canal. We remember this. It took 10 years, 15 years to build the canal. No, it was like 1904 to 1914. It was around $10 billion adjusted for inflation. Panama expanded it like 8 years ago. It's like a $6 billion project to expand the canal. They make a lot of money off the tolls and things like that. But the point is, we want China gone from Latin America. This is absurd. And so Beijing doesn't want to leave, and the CCP is mad at Hong Kong for trying to sell the ports to BlackRock. It's a lose-lose no matter what happens. But no, we just want them. We just want it out of Chinese control. That's it. But look, Trump needs. Let's hope this ends up happening. We thought it was going to happen, but now here's this hang up. It is what it is. I don't know. Here they are. The media gets their script. Oh, now it's stagflation. They said it was going to be a recession. It's terrible. They kept citing the Atlanta Fed, which is routinely, when they do the predictions in terms of the quarterly GDP, they're routinely 1% to 2% off. But the media's like, oh, and the Atlanta Fed says negative 2.5% GDP growth. It's going to be a recession because we're going to get another negative quarter in quarter two. Now they're like, we admit it's probably going to be positive. So they tell the media, okay, well, now say it's stagflation. When inflation was lower than projected, how's it stagflation? Inflation has to rise. I have seen numbers. You look at some NBC reports and things about inflation possibly rising in Q3, which would not be good. We have to get the interest rate. Trump was handed a very bad economy that was manipulated late by the Fed when they lowered rates when they shouldn't have in September. Of course, they did that to try and help Harris win. It didn't work. But Trump was handed high inflation, high interest rates. Good luck. Well, so we have to do this. We have to tear it down, but more so the tariffs are a little bit different when it comes to interest rates and trying to manipulate that. And it can in turn, because the tariffs create a bad economic environment which could lower inflation short term. They always say, well, tariffs raise inflation. Well, it's actually a byproduct. If you have this situation to where Trump's been really wishy-washy on tariffs, it's going to create a hazy economic situation with the stock market, which will then in turn lower the stock market, which will lower inflation. So as a byproduct of the early tariff talk by Trump, which is what it is now. It's like, is he going to do it? Is he not going to do it? Liberation Day, 25% on everyone. He's threatening all of this, and then he puts them on Mexico, then he takes them off, puts it on China, then he removes some of them, then it gets negotiated. It's lower. It is creating an early economic problem for Trump, but it's a short-term problem, and it is also lowering inflation. That's why inflation was lower than expected, the monthly inflation, and I think inflation is probably going to be down on April 10th as well. And then here they are asking Trump about stagflation.
Now, is that something that you're worried about, given the impact of your efforts to readjust the economy?
I haven't heard that term in years. No, I don't know anything about it. This country is going to be more successful than it ever was. It's going to boom. We're going to have boom down USA. We're going to boom.
Yeah, Trump's advisors told him they were going to start this grift about stagflation, and because they were trying to push recession. Oh wait, it's not going to happen now. Now we have to do it. But here are some projections. First quarter GDP growth will be just 0.3%. Remember, they said it was going to be negative 2.5%. Now they're like, oh, it's only going to be 0.3%. Well, yeah, that's because of the tariffs. That's because there's turmoil. This is not a quick fix. You have to explain to people this is the U.S. economy. It takes time. When you get handed high interest rates, high inflation, this is the reality of it. And you've also got a situation to where, Trump deems us being ripped off in these trade deals. Whether we're ripped off or not, it's kind of irrelevant. We have to be able to manufacture and make goods. It's very important. And you've got all these companies who want to produce things as cheap as possible. When you've got slave labor in China, it's going to be cheaper in China. You have to compete with that. And the way you do that is through tariffs. So either the tariffs are going to generate us $600 billion, $700 billion in revenue, or we're going to get the other countries to remove their reciprocal tariffs off of us, and we're going to get more domestic production. It depends. Does Trump want to keep the tariffs on? If he does, it is going to be a time period to where we will have some economic turmoil. It's going to be a continued period of that, but eventually we're going to see the light, and we're going to get more domestic production, and things are going to be a lot better, because that will in turn hopefully foster lower inflation, which will then call for hopefully the Fed to lower the interest rates, and then you get lower inflation, lower interest rates, and that's when you can really, really have a good economy, just like Trump had in late 2018, 2019. That was the combination. It's like 2% inflation with very low interest rates, like 2%, 2%. That's kind of what you want. So, but see how they're trying to spin this? They're like, now it's stagflation. They were saying forever it was going to be a recession. It's terrible. I said even having a recession, there's positives to it, and especially when you look at the housing market, there's positives to it just because of how bloated it is at this point. But we're not even going to have that. And so you've got these projections right here. This is the GDP forecast, 0.3%. I mean, there's not a single negative quarter here from what they're currently projecting. And these are very, rough estimates. You've got the core inflation, which is what they look at, the Fed. They've got it going down to 2.6% and then up to 3%. So that's where the stagflation would come in. It would be a raised inflation with, an economic outlook that's not very positive. Normally you see the raised inflation, the economy is humming. But eventually then, quarter 4 of 2025, they would have to lower the rates at that point if these projections are correct, because it's 2.4 and it goes down to 2.1. Hopefully this doesn't happen. Hopefully it doesn't go up to 3, because that would create a not so good economy and scenario for Trump. But either way, I mean, if it goes down by Q1 of 26 and you've got low inflation and low interest rates leading right into the midterms, because you would be talking about them lowering interest rates. I mean, I hope they lower interest rates in June. I don't have much faith that they're going to do it, though. I guess it depends on the core inflation update. So either way, they're trying to do this thing now. They're saying, oh, it's stagflation. Yes, we said it was going to be recession. Now there's not going to be a single negative quarter of GDP growth. Remember, they said it was going to be -2.5. It's just not happening. So they're having to change it to stagflation, and they're asking Trump about it. And we've got the tariffs in place. And listen, you can't really project that, oh, the U.S. government is going to make $600 billion in revenue off tariffs this coming year, because we don't know if Trump is going to keep all of them in place. But the auto tariffs, they're saying it's $100 billion. And so that right there would be 5% of the deficit cut. Now, obviously, that comes with other things. It's not just an automatic 5% decrease and nothing happens. Yes, the car prices in certain cars, the luxury vehicles, would rise, and maybe a few other vehicles as well. But the point of it is there's always a yin and a yang when it comes to the economy. We know this. So listen, if you can imagine $500 billion in revenue off of these tariffs, it is pretty impressive. I mean, ideally, it wouldn't even be that much because the U.S. companies would not be buying overseas because of the tariffs. They would be building in the United States, and that's the point of the tariffs. But even if they do, the U.S. government gets revenue from that, and we know Trump is going to try and implement a really radical tax strategy. I mean, he's talking about going after some of these companies that have these offshore accounts, and it's like they're saying it's $1 to $2 trillion in revenue. I mean, this is going to be if he can pull this off, could you imagine this going after some of these companies and these extremely wealthy people who are able to manipulate the tax system by using offshore accounts? Imagine he's able to make like $1 trillion or something. I mean, this is some serious stuff. And if you're able to do that, now you're talking about radically changing taxes within the United States. And then you think about it and you say, this is something to where if we're able to, let's say there's no tax on any money, any revenue you make under 100K, there's zero taxes. I know they wanted 150. I don't know if they'll be able to pull off 150. The problem is with lowering taxes right now, we've got a $2 trillion deficit. So it's kind of hard to lower taxes. We need the revenue. But you could get the revenue. You can generate it through tariffs possibly. The issue is that tariffs are going to create the higher prices, possibly higher inflation. But you can control inflation easier, especially considering now we're not in the, we've got to kickstart the economy right after the pandemic. Again, Trump was not handed a good economy. When you're dealing with higher inflation, higher interest rates, those are two very negative things, and it takes time to correct those. And with Trump, this is definitely a more aggressive approach than how the liberals would have handled it, especially when it comes to tariffs. But let's just say it's more like ripping the proverbial Band-Aid off, to where maybe the initial struggle is more than we would see under a Harris, but the long-term gain, and it's not even long-term, I mean, we're talking about 2-3 years from now, in terms of either revenue through tariffs, that's going to create, whether it's a Doge dividend where everyone gets $5,000, whether it's elimination of taxes under a certain amount of money, whether it's lower taxes. I mean, Trump obviously does want to do the lower taxes, and that's going to be going into place. We're hoping that because of these aggressive moves by Trump early on in his administration, year 3 and year 4 will be a boom for the U.S. economy. Obviously, right now it's not. We know that. This is turbulence. When you change the levers of the U.S. economy, and when you do things like tariffs, initially there are going to be some problems. But again, you want to compare this to something. How about the egg prices? We remember liberals went crazy, and I said, I'm not even going to give Trump credit when the egg prices go down because it's so ridiculous. Because we know with the bird flu and everything, and they had to kill all the chickens. But I said, this is crazy. Why would liberals yell at Trump for this? It's not even his fault. It was the Biden administration, based on protocol. They did that, and they unfortunately killed it. Well, I mean, just because they wanted to contain the virus, the bird flu, they killed all those chickens, and it caused the egg prices to soar. And I said, of course the egg prices are going to go down. But at that time period, like right after Trump came in, they were criticizing Trump for egg prices and saying, how could Trump do this? Well, now the egg prices are lower than they were in like December of 2024. So is Trump like this god for doing that? Well, no, this is the problem when people overreact to very short-term economic situations. Just like this situation with the tariffs. It's a short-term. This one might be a little bit longer than the egg situation, obviously, because it's a bit more seismic, because it is affecting the stock market and other things as well. But the point is, we want years 3 and years 4 of this economy to be extremely strong. And right now, Trump is doing things to set it up, whether he follows through with these tariffs or not. Right now, the tariffs are a double negative, because he's putting tariffs on countries, which is going to be an initial negative for the stock market, and he's being very wishy-washy about it, which is another negative because there's uncertainty. But that's not to say, oh, Trump's doing a bad job. This is just the reality of how it's going to start out. The wishy-washiness, I think, is going to go away, and Trump knows it has to go away at a certain point, hopefully relatively soon. Now, we'll see what happens with this next batch that he wants to deploy of tariffs. We might still have a few months of turbulence, depending on what other countries do in response. It seems like there's going to be a response from China, another response. It seems like there's going to be a response from the EU in terms of more reciprocal tariffs onto the United States, and so that's going to complicate things as well. But at that point, then if we're just going to keep doing reciprocals, then yeah, we're going to have to keep our tariffs on, because we're just going to either we're just going to have to drive domestic production, or we're going to get 9-figure revenue off of just tariffs alone. And again, there are negative aspects to tariffs. Yes, they can potentially drive up inflation slightly. It's not a big inflation is not a crazy worry when it comes to tariffs. I guess it depends how many tariffs you put on, but they always talk about inflation in it, because now they're saying with stagflation, well, inflation is going to rise, the economy is not going to do anything, so that's why they're worried. But I believe inflation eventually will go down under Trump within the next, probably within the next few months. It already has gone down. It was and some of that is because of the tariffs, the inflation going down in Trump's first, what was it, February, when they reported on March 10th. It was lower than expected. So we'll have to see what it is on April 10th, but I don't think it's going to skyrocket or anything like that. It can't, based off of the economy situation right now in the United States. So, they're trying to do this whole thing where it's like, now it's stagflation. Like, this is their new thing, because it was originally a recession. They can't use it. So they get these talking points. They're like, well, we were using the Atlanta Fed's numbers. They said it was going to be possibly a recession. We were going to get at negative first quarter GDP growth, and then we could manipulate that and manipulate people, and then Trump's approval rating would go down, because we would say, oh, if quarter 2 is negative, that's an automatic recession. Well, now it's not. So they're saying, well, what's the next best thing? Well, it's stagflation, something that really hasn't been a huge topic since the 70s. And then Reagan got handed the terrible economy. And then if you look at Reagan's first few months, it was horrible. And then he turned everything around. That would have been the early 80s. So either way, guys, that's just the situation when it comes to the economy. I mean, listen, Trump, there's going to be a lot of money. If Trump sticks to the tariffs, there's going to be a lot of money. Either way, this is a win-win, because you put reciprocal tariffs on the EU. You put reciprocal tariffs on Vietnam. Remember what happened with Vietnam? Vietnam removed all their tariffs in preparation for Liberation Day, or most of them. They scaled them back. So that's the hope with especially some of these smaller countries. But when it comes to the bigger ones like the EU, if we put reciprocals on them, then both the countries will remove their tariffs, because it doesn't make sense, or they'll just put reciprocals back on us, which I think is what the EU is going to do. And then we'll just say, okay, we're just keeping ours on our tariffs on you. We're going to force American companies to either give us revenue if they want to buy your crap, or they will have to domestically produce it. And of course, there's the argument you get, well, then everything's going to cost more if it's made in the USA. Well, I mean, we have to. It's like the housing market. The housing market's going to have to pop, or something's going to have to happen at some point. It's just completely bloated. I mean, there could be short-term economic downtrends just because of the situation that we've been handed. What do you want us to do? So we'll have to see what happens with all of this. But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.